Welcome to The Explainer. I am so thrilled you're here today because we're going on a truly fascinating journey into the hidden mechanics of human interaction. I mean, we communicate every single day, right? We're constantly firing off emails, chatting with friends, listening to speeches. But have you ever stopped to think about the invisible gears turning behind every single word we choose? Well, today we're going to unpack exactly how language works using two incredibly powerful linguistic tools, Discourse and Pragmatics.
Seriously, think about it for a second. Why do words almost never mean exactly what the dictionary says? If a friend looks out the window at a massive pouring rainstorm and goes, "Well, lovely weather we're having," the dictionary definitions of the words lovely and weather do absolutely nothing to help you understand that they are actually being sarcastic. Everyday language is basically a giant puzzle. Simple sentences often carry entirely hidden meanings, and they're shaped by who we are, who we're talking to, and the society we live in.
All right, so here is our roadmap for the explainer today. We'll start with the communication puzzle, move on to defining discourse, then hit the pragmatics perspective, look closely at discourse versus pragmatic analysis, explore the intersection, and finally wrap up with why it matters.
Okay, kicking things off with part one, the communication puzzle. To solve any really complex puzzle, you need the right tools. And to truly decode what people are saying, linguists rely on two distinct lenses. Imagine holding a camera for a second. First, you've got your macro wide-angle lens. This captures the whole sweeping landscape, the society, the culture, the history. That is discourse. But then you've got this micro magnifying glass. This lets you zoom all the way in to look at the individual speaker, right in that specific, fleeting moment, to figure out exactly what they're secretly trying to achieve. And that is pragmatics.
Moving right along to section 2, defining discourse.
So let's snap on that wide-angle lens first, and I want you to zoom out and look at the absolute biggest picture of language. Consider this beautiful definition by the linguist N.D. Arutunova. She actually describes discourse as speech immersed in life. Isn't that just a great phrase? It basically means that a text doesn't exist in a vacuum. It is deeply, fundamentally connected to extra-linguistic factors. So we're talking about things totally outside of just grammar and vocabulary here. Discourse is enriched by the sociocultural norms of a specific historical period, the psychology of the masses, and broader social actions. You literally cannot separate the words from the world they were spoken in.
And building on that, scholar M. Stubbs points out another really foundational block. Discourse is always larger than a single sentence. It's all about studying the organization of language above the sentence level. So think of an entire conversation, a full academic paper, or a political debate. The crucial takeaway here is that discourse is inherently interactive and it is rooted deeply in a social context. It's basically society communicating with itself.
Which brings us to section 3, the pragmatics perspective.
All right, time to swap lenses. Let's put away that wide angle for a second. What happens when we zoom way in at a speaker's hidden individual intentions? Enter pragmatics. Drawing from the foundational ideas of thinkers like Charles Morris, pragmatics focuses purely on the micro level. It is the study of the relationship between the sign, the word itself, and its user. When we talk about pragmatics, we're really talking about speech acts, like what is the user actually doing with their words? Are they promising something, threatening, apologizing, requesting? Pragmatics is all about the local context and the individual's specific communicative intent in that exact moment.
Let's see how this actually plays out in real life. Linguist G. Leach highlights that pragmatics involves things like the cooperative principle and the politeness principle. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. These operate completely differently depending on the specific cultural community or social situation you're in. Pragmatics analyzes the dynamic, local choices a speaker makes on the fly. How do they navigate a tricky social situation? How do they save face? How do they use language to achieve a highly specific goal, like, getting out of a parking ticket or asking their boss for a raise?
Let's move to section 4, discourse versus pragmatical analysis.
Okay, so we've got our two lenses. Now, how does this actually translate into two distinct ways of analyzing a text? The clash between discourse versus pragmatics is super interesting here. Just think about the stark contrast in the questions being asked. Discourse analysis looks at a text and asks, what is society doing here? How does this reflect power dynamics or overarching ideology? It's massive. Pragmatical analysis, on the other hand, looks at the exact same text and asks, what is this individual speaker trying to achieve right now with this specific utterance? One looks at the big social structure, the other zeroes in on the individual's targeted intention.
Digging a little deeper into the academic side of things, scholar M. Makarov notes that discourse analysis is built on observing social actions, the construction of texts, and how language reveals power dynamics and ideologies. Pragmatical analysis, though, zeroes in on what we call ostensive inferential communication. Now, I know that's just a really fancy academic way of saying, how do we actually infer what someone means? It relies heavily on Paul Grice's concept of conversational implicatures, which basically just means the hidden messages that are implied when someone deviates from standard rules of cooperation in a conversation.
To cleanly and efficiently summarize all these dense academic differences we've just covered, you can clearly see the divide when we look at their core features. Discourse focuses on social action. Pragmatics focuses on speaker intent. The unit of measurement for discourse is the broader text and context. For pragmatics, it's the specific speech act or utterance. And you can see the different theoretical heavyweights lining up on each side of this, with Van Dyke and Stubbs championing discourse, while Grice, Leach, and Morris hold down the pragmatic side. Now for Section 5, the intersection.
Now, you might be sitting there thinking these are entirely competing theories that have absolutely nothing to do with one another, but they actually overlap in some incredible ways. When we look at the models from linguist A.G. Guruchik-Sin on the scientific features of discourse, guess what's sitting right there at the foundation? The pragmatic principle. Guruchik shows that discourse is made up of syntactic structure, semantic meaning, and pragmatic action. So pragmatics isn't actually separate from discourse at all. It's a core, foundational component nested right inside of it. You literally can't have a fully realized social discourse without the individual pragmatic intentions that build it up.
And we see this seamless merging of the lenses in some really specific fields of study today. Take sociopragmatics, for example. This is the sociological interface of speech. It combines a speaker's individual intent with their social status, their gender, or their age. It basically asks how your social role changes your pragmatic strategy. Or consider metadiscourse, which is a huge part of academic writing. This is how writers actively intervene in their own text to offer a comment, show their attitude, or build a connection with you, the reader. Both of these areas require us to use that wide-angle lens and the magnifying glass at the exact same time.
Finally, Section 6, why it matters.
Okay, let's bring all this heavy academic theory back down to earth for a minute. Why does knowing the difference between pragmatical analysis versus discourse analysis actually matter for you? Well, because using both of these lenses together is pretty much the ultimate superpower for truly understanding any message you encounter. Whether you're reading a passive-aggressive email from your boss, watching a political speech, or just scrolling through the news, try this three-step process. Step 1, read the surface text. What do the words literally say? Step 2, uncover the hidden intent using your pragmatics magnifying glass. What is the speaker actually trying to achieve right now? Step 3, zoom out. Use your discourse lens to analyze the broader social impact. What does this text say about the society or the corporate culture that produced it?
And that basically wraps up our journey into the hidden mechanics of language. But I want to leave you with this final thought. When you're scrolling your feed today, or sitting in your next meeting, which lens are you going to use first? Will you look through the macro lens of societal discourse, or will you zoom in with the micro lens of personal pragmatics? Honestly, try picking up both. I promise you, you will never look at a simple sentence the same way again. Thanks so much for exploring this topic with me.